5-step process for recovering from injuries in the gym. I know you didn't ask, but I'm going to throw this out here anyway because even if you don't need it, it might be beneficial for someone else. First, assess the injury to see if it is something that is catastrophic or requires immediate medical intervention. Something like a broken bone, a torn muscle, or like a dislocated joint. Yeah, you got to go to the hospital for that. It amazes me still how many people have an injury and their immediate response is like, it's so catastrophic I can't train, but it's not catastrophic enough that I need to get like any kind of medical attention. These type of injuries generally don't exist. The only way you can't train through an injury is if it is something that requires immediate medical intervention, which takes us to number 2, identify an entry point. Since we've done shoulder, we're gonna use that as the example. Maybe you can't do a barbell overhead press through full range of motion with your normal weight, but can you do it if you reduce weight? Can you do it if you reduce range of motion? Can you do it if you use dumbbells instead or a machine instead? Reduce and adjust load and or modify the exercise until you get to a point where you can do a similar movement pattern that is tolerable. The next thing you do is you test and assess. Now that you've identified that the issue is not so catastrophic that it precludes training, and you've also have a suspected entry point in which you can do a similar exercise that will be tolerable. Example, 3 sets of 5 with 90 pounds was what hurt you on overhead press. Maybe you need to start out with 4 sets of 3 with like 10-pound dumbbells. And you test this, and you might not always get this perfect on your first try. Maybe the load is too light, and then next week you need to increase it. Maybe the load is too heavy, and it's quite painful, and you need to reduce. The only way to know is really to test and adjust. This would also be a good time to mention that this is not something that happens in the span of like 2 minutes usually, though it can. It's something that happens over the course of like a few training sessions at minimum. Anyway, next thing you do, and you should have been doing this all along, is implementing some form of auto regulation into your training. And what this means is you are using RPE, rating of perceived exertion, or RIR, reps in reserve, to not always train to failure, basically put a limiter on yourself and get an idea for what training in certain intensity ranges feel like while you are in your reduced performance state right now due to injury. You can read all about RPE and RIR from people like Barbell Medicine. And the last thing you do is, once you've determined the injury is not catastrophic, established an entry point, tested your hypothesis, and started implementing auto-regulation, you start systematically removing the barriers and constraints that you have put on as the condition improves. If you've placed a range of motion limitation on the exercise, start slowly increasing that range of motion back to normal. If you have a load limitation that you've implemented, start slowly increasing load until you can get it back closer to normal. If you've changed the exercise, start progressing back until you get closer to the version of the exercise that you want to do. And eventually, through doing this, you will get back to normal function and performance. Anyway, if you've ever hurt yourself at the gym or have other exercise related things that you're not perfect at, follow me at Johnny Reps Fitness.